Hello and welcome to the Sport for Business Daily. We go international today, in fact, the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, where we're joined by Lisa Aussiekier and Dheeraj Ravula, both of them from Mediakind, a global media business which has produced a fascinating new report into the whole world of direct-to-consumer broadcast. We've seen here in Ireland over the last number of months how much streaming has really taken hold in terms of both the fan experience and in terms of how the rights holders are looking at creating areas in which they can both monetize and deliver their sports content. Gone are the days when it was just all about the single linear broadcast deal. Well, I'm delighted that Lisa and Dheeraj are with us today. We're going to go through a few moments of presenting some of the findings, and then we'll come back and we'll be able to ask a few questions of what goes in. From an Irish context, just to say that both the Guinness Pro 14 rugby and the GAA, together with UEFA, the NBA and NFL, have all contributed into this report with their knowledge and understanding as well. So it is both global, but also with local interest. So for the time being anyway, over to you, Lisa and Dheeraj.
Thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. We undertook, along with an agency called Playmakers, a global study of the sports rights holder D2C market. And we're very excited to share those findings. As you know, Mediakind is, through its historic roots of several acquisitions and mergers, including Tamberg Television and Ericsson Media Solutions, to name a few. We have a long history in providing TV and media technology, especially to operators and broadcasters. Over the last several months, almost a year, we've found ourselves engaging a lot more with rights holders, content rights holders, especially in the area of sports. And so that was the reason for undertaking this study. The agency that we worked with actually conducted interviews with a lot of the 40 that are listed. And we covered 7 areas: overall strategy, content, platform stability, business models, subscription pricing, fan engagement features, and monetization opportunities. And the few that we wanted to highlight for you today, before we get into some of your questions, are the areas of fan engagement. First of all, we find that in a nutshell, while all of the properties and leagues interviewed and analyzed in this report seem to find D2C very essential in their strategy, about half, are really only using this today as a content delivery system and not really using fan engagement features. So we find that there's this kind of brink of rising the bar from a pure entertainment platform to a really truly fan engagement platform. The second thing that is kind of our leading findings is platform stability. So, everybody that we look at was wildly embracing, the concept of having very great video quality and great user experience, low latency, all of those things. But doing it at scale is kind of the next horizon. So that's one of the things that we looked into. And then the other thing, as you mentioned, is monetization opportunities, secondary monetization opportunities. And that goes kind of hand in hand with that fan engagement. There's a lot to tap there that's currently untapped. So with that being said, as kind of a brief introduction, turn it over to Dheeraj, who's head of the product area for D2C solutions, and he can kind of expand a little bit.
Any questions before I go in a little more in depth in how we approach the report and the motivations for actually kind of commissioning the report?
Oh, I think we'll kick in and have a look at what the numbers tell us.
Okay, perfect. So a couple of things that bring us to this point really is our long history in being the video experts. Mediakind, with its heritage of being as part of Ericsson, part of being of Tandberg, Microsoft, we've always been providers of video technology, right? That focus primarily on robustness, scale, and quality. Those are the three standing pillars that we operated on. And then the second layer of that is always doing things in standards compliant ways. And as we started noticing that a shift, especially in the sports fields, towards OTT as a delivery mechanism for content, as well as engaging the fans, it is the same set of technologies that are actually employed in the OTT space. And the shift that's happened already in OTT for media entertainment content, think of Netflix and Disney and those properties, that's almost complete, right? That shift from going from a broadcast way of delivering content to going D2C is complete. We're seeing the same trend with sports. And there's primarily a few headwinds that are forcing that strategy for most of the leagues and content owners. The big headwinds that we're noticing is the dismantling of the pay TV service. Majority of the leagues got their revenues from broadcast rights. And the broadcast rights were anchored in pay TV subscriptions. If you looked at early 2000, there was a 90% penetration in the US for pay TV subscriptions. That's dwindled down to almost 66% today. And that trend is going to continue. So as a sports league, when you look at those numbers and look at the major source of revenue being broadcasters that are tied to the pay TV bundle, you almost look at the OTT solution as a strategy, right? Because you continue to have a lot of revenues coming in from broadcast technologies, broadcaster rights sales. However, there's a future pressure on those revenue rights. We don't see it today, primarily because sports is really what's keeping the pay TV bundle from further dismantling at a higher rate. And then there's a second trend is most of the leagues, this is common to the big leagues as well as the small leagues, is how do you address fans in dark markets? Dark markets are typically not your primary markets where you have majority of your fan base. And getting broadcaster rights at the right price in dark markets has always been a challenge for sports entities. And using OTT as a way to reach those fans is pretty much on top of every one of these leagues. And that does two things. It gives you a way to experiment in the dark markets with the new technology that will come in handy as you try to protect your revenues in your major markets. And as a technology itself, OTT provides you things that you could not have done in the broadcast world. In the broadcast world, it was mostly a sit-back experience. You saw the TV and somebody, typically an expert, would decide what you get to see, right? In terms of camera angles, in terms of the commentary that went with it, in terms of the data that's being presented for statistics and all kinds of things that kept them engaged. But that was pretty much decided at the production phase, right? I mean, maybe 1 or 2, 3 different curated feeds being produced that was consumed by everybody. OTT gives you a new way to engage the fans, because engaging with the fans is how you protect your revenues, right? So that's the common theme, is being able to get full insights into how a user's interacting with your content, may it be live or if it's archived content, gives you immense amounts of data on how to further engage them. An engaged user is usually a monetizable user, right? So that's how the leagues kind of start seeing this as a way to protect their revenues, not just today, but also in the future. So expand your markets into areas where you don't have broadcast rights as a primary strategy. And then also kind of build the expertise on building technology as well as engaging the fan. Because now you have a completely closed loop of being able to understand your fan in ways that you haven't been able to in the past. Majority of the last 2 decades, leagues primarily made revenue without really building a lot of competence in technology that is meant for marketing as well as for delivery of the content effectively to the end users. So this is starting to change and starting to change rapidly. In the past, we've also noticed, and this is the trend that Lisa was talking about, is the need for scale. In the last 2 decades, prevalence of sports using OTT technologies has been gradually increasing, but I think we're at a critical point where that inflection point almost, where that pace is going to rapidly increase. We've never seen huge volumes of concurrent streams using OTT technologies in the past. There's a few exceptions. I think we've noticed that cricket for the World Cup had about 15 million concurrent users. That's probably the highest we've seen so far. But when you talk about millions of users in the broadcast world, that was normal. I mean, that's pretty much expected. So all the organizations that we've interviewed start seeing as they need a technology provider that can cobble together a solution that's robust, has the quality, can deliver savings because they have the core technologies in terms of storage costs and delivery costs, as well as building it to scale, not just to reach to a core region, but across the globe. So that was one of the biggest findings. And then the second one is, how do you engage your fan in ways you couldn't, right? With OTT, there's multiple ways you could do this. But that also opens up new revenue propositions, especially with personalized advertising. That was a little bit of a surprise that only 8% have actually engaged in some sort of advertising on the OTT. But personalized advertising and the promise it brings for high ARPU from ad revenues is the next frontier. It's not surprising that most of the leagues have employed subscription as a way to generate revenue using OTT models. And even the subscriptions, they've cast a wide net, right? In terms of being able to offer a yearly subscription, which is the most preferred, a monthly subscription, because that brings a little bit of instability in revenues. And then also being able to serve multiple games, offer multiple games as a subscription, selling a single game, or even parts of a game. Not much of a big surprise, but it does introduce new challenges when it comes to scale, especially when you're letting them buy parts of a game, because that brings peaks concurrencies back into picture. And being able to handle not just the video peak concurrencies, but the transactional and the session-based monitoring of the user concurrencies into picture. Most often people also forget that personalized advertising means you need to scale, and a CDN doesn't really help you there, right? So that's where the technology robustness, the platform robustness comes into place, is as all of these sports organizations get into the space of adding additional revenues from advertising, that scale becomes more critical. If we take the trends from entertainment content and apply it to sports content, and also kind of look at it historically of how revenue is made on sports content, advertising is the key. Right? What we're noticing from just observation in the media and entertainment space is a good portion of the revenues, even though subscription is a preferred route, you can make as much or more using personalized advertising, because this is content that's premium. Right? It's not just content that's thrown at YouTube. Unfortunately, some of the leagues do put their content on YouTube, in my mind, devaluing their brand, because you're kind of pushing down the value of your content by putting it into open ecosystems that don't have any brand value. So that's kind of the big things that we've noticed is just those trends and the need for kind of looking at it in a more proactive fashion. The second theme is a lot of these contract rights are in place, the broadcaster contract rights, and there's also a lot of them that'll be coming up for renewal. So this is forcing a lot of sports leagues to kind of have a strategy that kind of positions them in a way that they have this direct-to-consumer aspect, as well as continue to generate revenues from broadcast rights. And what we would probably also notice is they're all going to expect to be able to experiment in the markets before they kind of finalize their strategies. So Mediakind, when we looked at we kind of went into the report with a few assumptions, thinking, is the market heading OTT was the biggest question. And that was validated pretty much by almost all the leagues that said that OTT is really on top of their mind, being able to directly reach to their fan base. but they also want to be able to experiment quickly, learn from the market, and then expand, right, as their rights are coming up for renewal. So it's important when we look at what can we do as Mediakind to help the sports leagues not only protect their revenue, but kind of expand the revenue and create a new areas where they can address their fans. We basically have the solutions that we built over the last 2 years, last 2 decades that apply to this market. We've been mostly focusing on the broadcaster side of the business so far and the operator side of the business, but the core essential technologies is pretty much the same. So that's kind of where we are focusing, is producing end-to-end turnkey solutions that are easy to implement, bring the sports organizations to the market in a quick time to market fashion, create low cost barriers of entry, enabling them to experiment and grow. That's basically our approach to what we're starting to see in this market that's validated by the report.
Okay, the number of those that you interviewed for it, 8% that are actually monetizing through the use of advertising, that does seem incredibly low. The Thanksgiving game on NBC when Pittsburgh and Baltimore had to move to the following week, that's estimated to have cost NBC in the region of $70 million just for that 1 3-hour broadcast. We're looking at a potential audience here, which is many times that which would be available just in the US domestic market. So what kind of revenue lift could be coming towards sport if it manages to get this right? It sounds as though it could be an absolute game changer.
So for non-sports content, expecting to see revenues of $10 and up for premium content for 1,000 ads inserted is kind of the norm. But we do expect sports content to get a lot bigger than $10 per game. But even when we do a projection of $10 per game and help the sports organizations that are currently less than 1 million monthly active users to move up the field, you can see the potential right there, right? Depending on the country, the number of ads that you insert into an hour of content varies widely, right? It can vary from 50 ads in an hour to 20 ads in an hour. But when you look at the monthly active users and the number of hours they're spending on your content and calculate the number of ads that are potentially insertable, the revenue potential is immense. In my estimate, at least my opinion, is the revenue potential for personalized ad insertions will surpass subscription, especially for sports.
I think that makes perfect sense. Do we know what the advertising model is going to look like? Because in a large number of video on demand services in OTT at the moment, there's pre-roll advertising, which there's a resistance to that because you can't necessarily skip through. If you go on to watch live sport, you want to be watching live sport in that moment. And if it's pre-roll advertising that goes for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 3 minutes, that becomes a real barrier. Are we going to get imaginative in terms of how the advertising comes in on live sporting events?
Yeah, we're starting to see a lot of new models that are being applied to personalized ads. The trend is definitely personalized ads just because you know your fan. But getting creative in terms of how you position ads and where you position ads will depend on the game itself. For example, it will be different for the NBA versus it will be different for football versus cricket versus soccer. And the format of the game pretty much dictates the innovative things that you can do with that game. But as a technology provider, we want to enable all those formats, right? You should be able to insert pre-roll ads. You should be able to insert mid-roll ads, transmitted over standards compliant messaging for opportunities. You should be able to put post-roll ads. You should be able to get creative in terms of placing ads in the stadium, in terms of smart banners and smart sponsorship banners, right? And our focus is how do we enable all of those specific for each game. Some of them apply across the games in terms of what you do in the venue pretty much applies to all games. But in terms of formats, some games actually do have a lot of breaks, which enables us to put a lot of ads into the mid-roll. And as a technology, we would want to provide all of them. And that's kind of where our focus is being able to insert ads, not just pre, mid, and venue-based advertising. And also going a step further, Mediakind does invest in a lot of R&D when it comes to 360 video, because that also opens up new avenues of where you can put ads. You can put ads in places inside the 360 virtual experience. So the potential's there. It's just for each game, what applies will probably differ a little bit.
Okay, and how far away are we from the experience where I could be watching a game on my iPhone and I see a personalized advertisement on what would traditionally have been the LED boards at the side of the ground, which is unique to me as opposed to you?
The technology exists. We've actually already deployed those technologies, and it's in production for a bunch of customers already. Mediakind has a long history of ad insertions. We've done it from almost 10 years ago in a different ecosystem, but the technology is still the same. Right? Being able to put not just inserts of pre and mid rolls, but also replacing ads that exist from a national, though that way you can do local overrides or override at the personalized level. And being able to target an audience, a person, the ultimate is to be able to target that person. But there are strategies you can employ where you can actually do it as a layered approach. Like being able to target nationally, because advertisers do want to be able to reach sometimes without having to personalize. And then have that option to drill down and be very specific about which portions of the content are available for personalized versus national. Those are our policies that Mediakind has expertise in managing.
Okay, two questions for you. The one relating to the relationship that right holders could have with broadcasters and one with fans. With broadcasters, first of all, this has been a winning relationship for both sides at the moment in terms of delivering mass audience to the sport, which benefits obviously in terms of sponsorship and engagement and attracting young players and new players into it. But also from the broadcaster's point of view, there are multiple businesses out there which are reliant on the pay TV, which, as you said, is declining, but also in the sort of the wider sense of sport. Is this an area where the sports rights holders are going to begin to in-house the broadcast technology and the marketing experience, which has traditionally lain on the broadcast side? Or, as we've seen with GAA Go here in Ireland, in partnership with RTE, the national broadcaster, that the two sides have actually come together and brought their own experience and their own strengths to be stronger together?
I think we'll probably see all of those as strategies by the content owners, in this case, the leagues. And it's not a matter of choice, it's a matter of reacting to what the industry trends are. Having your own way to reach audiences that you understand best, I think is a necessity, not a nice to have. It is something that we're seeing is a lot of leagues, in addition to selling their broadcast rights, will continue to invest in being able to reach their audiences directly, meaning they are the owners of the solution that gets them direct to the consumer. We will also see partnerships both with the broadcasters as well as the technology providers, where a league would partner with one or both of them to be able to offer both broadcast way of delivering content as well as the D2C model. I think it is a case-by-case decision pretty much for each of the leagues, and that depends on the size of the leagues and what their ambitions are. Well, we are seeing as a trend both of them.
Okay, and the final question really is one which we couldn't have imagined asking even a year ago, but the value of a fan in terms of one who is watching on a phone or a computer or a smart TV at home is clearly of much greater value now than a fan who is sitting in the stadium, where I don't know what he or she is watching. I know what they're eating. I know where they bought their ticket from, but I don't know the behavior to anything like the same degree as I do if they're watching it through a screen. So the fan at home is now clearly of much greater value to the fan in the stadium. They're also much cheaper to provide it to because I don't necessarily have to have the infrastructure of an 80,000 seater stadium. Are we moving towards an environment that we've had an unfortunate trial of during the course of 2020, where empty stadia are actually the norm and really the stadium is there just as a backdrop to the TV audience?
Yeah, I think we kind of foresaw this future, not where the stadium's empty, but the value of the fan outside the stadium goes up. COVID unfortunately kind of flipped it a little bit in terms of the stadiums being empty. I don't believe that's going to be a long-term thing. The stadiums have always been valuable for the fans. It's being there physically is not going to be any different in the future, even in the presence of being able to be there virtually. But the trend is the value of the fan outside the stadium will continue to go up just because you're now able to kind of personalize the experience for them. But in addition, the technology doesn't stop outside the stadium, right? The technology is actually being employed inside the stadium to engage the fans in ways they haven't been able to in the past. Think of being able to access multiple camera angles, both inside and outside the stadium, giving you viewpoints that you never had before, being able to pull up statistics on the fly. That way you kind of feel more engaged while you're watching the game, right? It's the combination of that lean back and lean forward. It happens both in the house and at the stadium, right? You kind of lean back when you want to just enjoy the game as is, and you lean forward when you're curious about what actually happened, right? Or I want to see a different angle in that game. So I believe the technology actually will improve the value of the fan both in stadium and outside the stadium. Okay. And to be honest, if we stop thinking about the value of the fan, I think the engagement of the fan will increase, which will automatically increase the value of the fan. Right? The fan's going to be much happier. He gets access to a lot more things that he was not able to do in the past, which means even when you put the ads and you put the ads in a way that's non-obstructive, it's a win-win situation that is being created.
It is a little bit dystopian to think of the sporting experience as just coming through a screen as opposed to being in the stadium. Maybe the stadium experience will become ever more of a premium experience that you perhaps have to pay more in order to get there, because the cost of providing that level of service to 50,000 in a stadium, as opposed to providing the same to upwards of 5 or 50 million people around the world that might be watching through a screen. If I was a financial accountant, I'd be looking at the value of each of those fan bases and seeing it a little bit different. Just to wrap up, was there anything that emerged from this study in 2020 that surprised you? I might ask you, Lisa, you've been looking at this in a big picture format. Was there anything that surprised you in terms of what you were getting back from the rights holders?
Just the things that I mentioned at the start, and the things that we've been commenting on, that, while everybody really analyzed their surveys in this report, wildly embraced direct to consumer as a strategy that they must have. Very few, less than, I think it's 50% are using some sort of engagement feature that could potentially be monetizable. But, very, very few are really using something that could be monetizable. Of that 50%, I think most of them are using like personalized content. So it's a more personalized experience for the consumer, which is great. But, advertising being relatively untapped and, no one, bridging over to integrated betting and, all of the other opportunities that we see being just, someone, trying this here and someone trying that there, but not being, widely leveraged yet. That really was what we saw as the big deal, as there being, all of this data there to kind of bolster a really great engaging experience that's yet to be tapped.
Okay, well, the experience of sport has always traditionally been in the here and now. It's the next ball, the next point, the next win, the next game. Clearly, though, in terms of the longer term future, the winners are the ones who are going to be looking beyond that final whistle, beyond the the here and now. And thank you for giving us vision of what that future might look like from the other side of the Atlantic in San Francisco and Atlanta. Thank you very much to Lisa Aussiekier and to Dheeraj Ravula from Mediakind. The report can be found on the sportforbusiness.com website and in other media as it's released this morning. It's going to look like in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.